The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Speaker, it is an honour to be standing here today as an MP and as a Minister in the 51st Parliament of New Zealand. Can I congratulate you on your role? I must say it's slightly freaking me out, you sitting there. It's the first time I've seen it. I was away last week, so it is kind of odd, but good odd. I must say, and it might be reflective of my own personality, but I'm kind of tempted to be a bit naughty just to see what you would do. But of course I won't, because that's not the way to start a parliamentary term. And you know, and I respect that, and certainly respect you being there. So good on you. You wanted it, you got it, and you look like you're enjoying it. So, well, he did. He really wanted to be the Assistant Speaker, so I think that's pretty cool. Hey, I was just finding it quite interesting to sort of think about where we're at now, and there's no doubt about it that we've just been given a mandate to be in government, but with that mandate comes a huge responsibility, and it is a huge responsibility to serve the people of New Zealand. The Prime Minister stated categorically that we would govern for all New Zealanders, and I have to say that when I woke up on the Sunday morning after the election, there is obviously that relief and that joy of winning, but equally was the weight of responsibility that comes with that. And the weight of responsibility in acknowledging the faith that many New Zealanders have put in us, and what you have to do to actually live up to that. And I think that all ministers in this House, all members of Parliament in this House, certainly National and our coalition partners, take that incredibly seriously. The Prime Minister has made it quite categorical what his expectations of us are, and he has been quite clear what his expectations of me are, and he has mentioned some of them in his address, and I would like to go into them a little bit further. But I do get to give a quick moment to say I'm kind of thrilled to be the first Member of Parliament for Upper Harbour. So it's a new electorate, formed of course because of the boundary changes, 50% in West Auckland, 50% on the North Shore and Greenhithe there. It was exciting to run there. I'm absolutely thrilled to be the Member of Parliament for Upper Harbour. Can't find an electorate office, which is always a challenge, but I'm really looking forward to serving them and being the best Member of Parliament that I can be. I feel like a new MP in many respects, because I've got to prove to them that I was worth their vote, and that's certainly my intention. I want to talk a bit about our most vulnerable New Zealanders in the context of social housing and the new role, and I know there's many questions about what that new role of Social Housing Minister means, and I also thought I would talk a little bit about the role that the Prime Minister has given me in regards to state services and the cross-agency work, and what that kind of means and how we can do that. And social housing, ultimately for me, it's got kind of three parts in the role that I am playing in it. So one is kind of that operational. So we passed legislation that meant that now within MSD we have the housing assessments being done, we're managing that social housing wait list, we're calculating and reviewing the income related rents, or IRR as I'll refer to them. We're paying them to the housing providers. We are doing tenancy reviews, which I mentioned today in question time, offering those additional housing support products which are taking off and proving to be quite interesting, purchasing of that sort of social housing. But the reason we did this is because a number of reasons. So one is it made no sense that whom were more often than not the same people having to go to Housing New Zealand, having to go to Work and Income, sort out the money, then go and try and find the house. The two didn't always talk well, even though I think they're fantastic people doing the best they can frontline. It made sense to move that in both logistically, but more importantly to be client and people focused, and for the person to have one door to go through. So that's kind of where it lay to start with. Then if we want to open up social housing, which means extending income-related rents to more than just state houses, you couldn't have Housing New Zealand being in charge of that, because ultimately they are the biggest player. I think they will always be the biggest player, no matter what kind of happens in the next 3 years. Even if we kind of sold off some of that stock, you are still going to see them be far, far, far dominant in the market, which I think think is a good thing, and that's where it should be. But you couldn't have them deciding who the community housing providers were, effectively who their competition was. And Housing New Zealand needs a bit of competition, quite frankly. They can up their game, they can do better, which I'm really proud to say they are, but we could see it all being quite different if we have a tenant and we're thinking about that person not just in their housing, but for many of them they need wraparound services, they need the support longer term, which we invest a lot of money through community organisations, and we can do better. Housing New Zealand, for the role that they do, and as I say, I think there's been marked improvements, and I want to say I'm really proud of the work they do. What they ultimately did was house someone and then pop in occasionally to make sure the asset was okay. Well, for these people, they need more help than that, and community housing providers or their community groups can often do that better than certainly the government can. So that is one of those reasons why you would open it up to community housing providers. We see many models of it overseas. Many of them in Australia where the government plays a part, but ultimately it is community housing providers. So then the challenge gets to how do you build their asset base to a level where they can then get further houses and further asset building from it. So that's the problem, they just don't have the scale right now, and that's a challenge in New Zealand. So we can sit back and say that's too hard and see them get maybe 5, maybe 10 houses over a 2 or 3 year period, or we can start thinking quite laterally. And that's where I know I was made a bit of fun of, and I love a bit of language, but it is exciting and it can be kind of sexy in how they can partner with developers, how they can partner with people who know property well. And actually it's our community housing providers that know people well, and if you put those together with the interests of our vulnerable New Zealanders right smack in the middle, there can be designs and things better than what we currently do now. And let me give you an example. We were around 15,000 people over the age of 65 living in state houses right now. Most of them are more than 1 bedroom, and as we constantly hear, and is the truth, there is a wait list and people whom are desperate to get into those homes. Actually, those homes are not fit for purpose for some of our elderly. They could live in better circumstances, they could live in village atmospheres, they can live in places where they have better support. It can actually be quite isolating, damn lonely. Is fit for purpose for someone older and on their own. We have seen many great examples of community organisations and developers designing and building places that would fit them better. So there's no way we are moving those people on unless they have somewhere better and more satisfactory for them to go. I have faith that community housing providers and others can do that, and that's what we're kind of backing them to do. So that change may not happen overnight, but there will be change, and it will be at the interests of the person at the centre of it. Putting them into a state house and leaving them there for decades without the right support, without the right kind of aspirations for what else could suit them, in many ways is negligent. And that is the role of a new social housing minister alongside the Minister of Finance, who is responsible for Housing New Zealand now, and equally with Nick Smith in the building area. So if you think about it, it needed a role of someone in the middle that isn't brought in completely to the Housing New Zealand State House, that can see it from the perspective of the New Zealander, of the person, and how we can address their new needs through different housing options. And I look forward to debating and discussing that further in the upcoming months. Lastly, Mr Speaker, I want to talk about cross-agency work because this is our next step forward. So we do data analytics better than we have ever done, and we are becoming world leaders in it, that and the investment approach. That means that we can prove whom we should spend more on earlier and over a long period of time. It's been very successful, if I might say so myself, in work and income and in us working in that area. I congratulate Anne Tolley. You've got the best portfolio in the government, of course. So we've seen the successes there. We can broaden that out across justice, across education, across health much better. So you can see who those people are that are most likely to rely on state support unless we change what we're currently doing, and we can. So I see myself, and that's why I was given the role of state services, because we have to look at reform in that area of how we actually set up services around people and their families, not around what suits government. And that's just the nature of being in the Westminster system. It's the nature of how government has created, but I don't think they have created it in the interests of New Zealanders, and that's what this government will be about.
Denise Roche.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I join with previous speakers in congratulating you on your